We're going to begin our study of economics with Chapter 1, the foundation and models of economics. In this first chapter, we're going to talk about several different ideas that are all related to each other. In the first section, we'll talk about the three key economic ideas and explore them in more detail. Then we'll look at the economic problem that every society must solve. Finally, we'll briefly touch on economic models, how we'll use them to try to understand what's going on in the world around us. We'll then explore the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics, and we'll give you a preview of important economic terms that we'll be using throughout this course. So let's jump into it. What is this class about? Through our lives, people make choices as they try to attain their goals. We have to decide between doing one thing or doing another, purchasing one thing or another, talking to one person or another, and these choices are necessary because we live in a world of scarcity. Now, what we mean by scarcity is a situation in which our unlimited wants exceed the limited resources available to fulfill those wants. So as human beings, we always want more than we're able to have. Now, because we want more than we're able to have, we don't have all of our possible wants and needs met. We have to decide between different alternatives. Decide, do I want this shirt or do I want to go to the movies tonight? Maybe I want to go out to dinner, eat at a restaurant instead, pretending COVID doesn't exist anymore. We have all these different alternatives, and we have to choose between them because of limited time, limited money, limited resources, all these things. So economics is the study of the choices that people make to attain their goals, given their scarce resources. What economists do is they study these choices using economic models. So these are very simplified versions of reality. We assume away a lot of complicating factors, and we use them to analyze real-world economic situations. Now, while they don't tell us everything about the world, economic models are very useful to give us some information, to explain how people are acting or what's the result of people's actions. Through this course, we'll learn how to answer some questions similar to the following. How are the prices of goods and services determined? In a market setting, the interaction of supply and demand, or what helps determine what the prices of goods and services are going to be, what we end up paying. Why do firms engage in international trade, and how do government policies affect international trade? Why does government control the prices of some goods and services, and what are the effects of those controls? And then we'll explore what is the unemployment rate, what is inflation, what is the gross domestic product, and how do these all interact with each other and relate to each other. Now let's turn to the three key economic ideas. So in this section, we'll explain the three key economic ideas. First, that people are rational. Second, that people respond to economic incentives. And third, that optimal decisions are made at the margin. So first, I want to start by highlighting the fact that we interact with one another in markets. So markets are a group of buyers and sellers of a good or service, and the institution or arrangement by which they come together to trade. So this is groups of buyers and sellers. So typically we have more than one company selling, more than one buyer willing to purchase, and we have the government setting up the arena within which this takes place. So there's typically regulations involved around that. There's a court system, so a legal system to protect people and to uphold contracts, things like that. Now, in analyzing markets, we assume the following: that people are rational, that they respond to economic incentives, and that optimal decisions are made at the margin. So these three key economic ideas we're going to assume, and we'll explore each of these in turn. Economists generally assume that people are rational. Now, I'm sure you sitting here listening to this, you think, well, that's crazy. I know tons of people that don't seem to act rational, that maybe they let too much emotion get involved in making their decisions. Maybe they don't stop and think about all the different costs and the benefits. But that's not exactly how economists use rationality. So when economists talk about rationality, they mean that people act in their best self-interest as they see it at that time. So now they may be right, they may be wrong. They may not sit down and write out a whole cost-benefit analysis. They may just go with their gut. What their gut thinks is the best thing to do. But when people are presented with multiple choices, they choose what they think is the best for themselves. given, 3, 4 different alternatives, and they one meets your needs perfectly, one meets them pretty well, and down the line, people aren't going to choose the second or the third best option. Given the cost and given the benefits of the different choices before you, you're going to pick the one that gives you the greatest benefit at the lowest possible cost. So you're going to weigh those costs and the benefits together. And just for an example, Apple doesn't randomly choose the prices of its smartwatches. It chooses a price that it thinks is going to be most profitable. So the next assumption of economics is that people respond to economic incentives. So as incentives change, so do the actions that people are going to take. This is one of the most important concepts in economics, the idea that incentives drive human action. So when the cost of an activity increases, so in that case the net benefit is going to fall, we're going to be less likely to engage in that activity. Again, it's relatively more costly than it was before, so we'll engage in less of it. Likewise, when the cost of an activity decreases, so in this case the net benefit is going to increase, we're going to be more likely to engage in that activity. Again, because it's now relatively more beneficial for us. Gary Becker, who was a great economist, made a career applying this very simple idea that incentives matter. So for example, there's been several changes that have resulted in increased obesity in America over the last couple decades. One of this includes decreases in the price of fast food relative to healthful food, so it's relatively cheaper to get unhealthy food. Improved non-active entertainment options. Instead of kids playing outside all the time, now they're inside playing video games. There's tons of entertainment on TV or any different streaming services for them to watch. Same thing goes for adults too. And the increased availability of healthcare and insurance protects people against the consequences of their action. Again, relatively less costly because you have healthcare that can deal with the sorts of problems that come from obesity. This is just one example of ways that incentives can change people's actions and change the things they do. The final assumption is that optimal decisions are made at the margin. So while there's a few things we make that are, all or nothing decisions, most decisions that we make involve doing a little more of something or a little less of something, buying a little more of something or buying a little less of something than last time. So when we talk about marginal, what we mean is the next unit. So for your marginal decision or for your decision making, if you're looking at the margin, you're thinking of what's the cost and benefit of watching an extra hour of TV versus an extra hour of studying. So you're comparing between the two, not all studying not saying should I study for 10 hours or nothing or watch 10 hours of TV or nothing. When you're saying that, you're like, well, should I study another hour or is it worth it to give up watch TV? How much is extra hour of studying going to actually help my grades? So economists think about decisions like this in terms of the marginal cost and the marginal benefit. So the marginal cost is the additional cost associated with that next unit of action. Whereas the marginal benefit is the benefit associated with that next unit of action or that next purchase of the next unit of the good. So when we compare the marginal cost and the marginal benefit of actions, this is what we call marginal analysis.